87 years ago, a woman took off in her silver Lockheed Electra and vanished without a trace, becoming a riddle locked in the depths of time. Despite history's most extensive search finding nothing, a sonar image from just a few months ago might have finally captured what we've been seeking for decades. This mysterious disappearance bridges our past with the present, a time when technology couldn't answer questions we're now equipped to solve. The mystery of Amelia Earhart isn't just a historical footnote. It's an active investigation that might be reaching its conclusion right before our eyes. Have you ever wondered how an experienced pilot with a fully equipped plane could simply vanish without a trace? The truth about Amelia Earhart's final hours reveals a cascade of failures, miscommunications, and unfortunate circumstances that created the perfect disaster. As Earhart approached the final leg of her ambitious round-the-world journey, the challenges mounted. Flying from Lae, Papua New Guinea to Howland Island presented a formidable task. Imagine trying to locate a tiny speck of land, barely 1.5 miles long, in the vast Pacific Ocean without GPS. It would be like searching for a grain of rice on a basketball court while blindfolded, a navigational challenge where failure meant certain death over endless ocean. The fatal communication breakdown between Earhart and the US Coast Guard cutter Itasca stemmed from a critical radio frequency mismatch. While the Itasca transmitted on 3,105 kHz, Earhart operated on different frequencies, 3,105 kHz at night, but switching to 6,210 kHz during daylight hours. This created an invisible wall between them, turning potential salvation into an unreachable mirage. The Itasca crew could hear her growing desperation, but couldn't respond effectively, leaving them as helpless witnesses to her unfolding tragedy. Weather conditions on July 2, 1937, worsened her predicament substantially. Overcast skies eliminated celestial navigation options, removing a crucial backup method. The Lockheed Electra 10E aircraft, though cutting-edge with its automatic pilot system and radio homing device, couldn't overcome these fundamental challenges. These navigational difficulties directly impacted her fuel situation, as Earhart encountered stronger headwinds than anticipated, a factor Harry Balfour in Lae repeatedly tried to warn her about through transmissions she never received. Each hour fighting these unexpected headwinds drained precious fuel reserves that couldn't be replaced. The sequence of Earhart's final communications reveals her dawning realization of disaster. At 8:43 a.m. Howland time, her voice crackled, "We must be on you but cannot see you. Gas is running low." Minutes later came her final critical transmission. "We are on the line 157, 337. We will repeat this on 6,210 kilocycles. Wait." This line of position would become central to decades of search efforts. Her desperate attempts to salvage the situation appeared in her altitude changes. Initially flying at 7,000 feet with 140 knot speed, she later climbed to 10,000 feet, a decision that accelerated fuel consumption when she could least afford it. Every minute searching for Howland burned irreplaceable fuel, creating a deadly countdown. Remarkably, Earhart never issued a formal distress call. Despite her clearly dire situation, no mayday or emergency protocol appeared in her final transmissions. Was she maintaining composure until the end? Or did conditions deteriorate so rapidly there simply wasn't time? The convergence of technical and environmental challenges created an aviator's worst nightmare. The communication system that should have guided her became a tormenting one-way channel. She could transmit but not receive vital guidance. These cascading failures, navigational challenges, communication breakdowns, weather interference, and dwindling fuel converged at precisely the wrong moment, transforming what should have been a triumphant completion of her round-the-world journey into one of aviation's enduring mysteries. That point of no return has remained frozen in time for decades, with no physical evidence confirming Earhart's fate until now. A mysterious sonar image captured in 2024 shows an object resting on the ocean floor that matches the exact dimensions of Earhart's Lockheed Electra, including those distinctive twin vertical stabilizers that made her aircraft unique. This could be the breakthrough that finally validates what officials have maintained all along, the simplest explanation for aviation's greatest mystery. This potential discovery, lying approximately 100 miles west of Howland Island, might finally bring closure to a mystery that has haunted aviation history for 87 years. If confirmed, it would explain why even the most extensive search efforts failed. They were looking in slightly wrong areas of the vast Pacific. The heartbreaking reality is that in such an immense ocean, being off by mere dozens of miles meant searching an entirely different patch of endless water. When Earhart vanished, the US government launched what became the largest naval search operation of its time. The USS Lexington aircraft carrier, alongside numerous other vessels, methodically swept through 250,000 square miles of Pacific Ocean. Yet despite this massive effort involving state-of-the-art ships and aircraft, searchers found absolutely nothing. No wreckage, no oil slick, not even a floating chart or personal item. The Pacific seemingly swallowed the aircraft whole, leaving only questions and theories in its wake. The government's theory has always been straightforward. Earhart ran out of fuel, crashed into the ocean, and her plane quickly sank to the bottom. But this explanation raises more questions than it answers. Why would such experienced aviators not send a proper Mayday distress call as their fuel dwindled? Emergency protocols would have been second nature to pilots of their caliber, yet the final transmissions contain no explicit distress signals, just uncertainty and confusion about their position. Think about it. If you knew you were about to crash into the ocean, wouldn't you make every effort to communicate your dire situation? The absence of these distress calls has fueled speculation for decades. Were they so focused on finding Howland Island that they didn't realize how critical their fuel situation had become until it was too late? Or did something else entirely prevent them from making those final calls? The search patterns used by the Navy reveal another curious detail. They focused their efforts predominantly north and west of Howland Island. This suggests officials had good reason to believe Earhart never made it close to her destination. Based on estimated fuel range calculations and the headwind conditions she reported, experts concluded she simply couldn't have remained airborne long enough to reach anywhere else. Understanding the Lockheed Electra's design gives us more insight into why no wreckage was ever found. Unlike modern aircraft with multiple buoyancy chambers, Earhart's plane wasn't built to stay afloat after a water landing. The metal aircraft would have sunk quickly after impact, plummeting beneath the waves within minutes and taking any surface evidence with it. Decades later, as technology has evolved to probe the ocean's deepest secrets, we may finally be uncovering what those 1937 search teams could never have found. This discovery by deep-sea vision could validate decades of expert analysis pointing to the crash and sink theory, and perhaps finally bring peace to aviation's most enduring mystery. The mysterious radio signals that continued days after Earhart's supposed crash into the ocean challenged the conventional narrative. These weren't random electromagnetic anomalies. They followed a specific pattern that aligns perfectly with the tide cycles of a forgotten island named Nikumaroro, formerly Gardner Island. This correlation suggests something far more intriguing than a quick death at sea. If we follow the 157-337 line Earhart mentioned in her final transmission, it leads directly through Nikumaroro, an uninhabited atoll about 350 miles southeast of Howland Island. This remote location, missed by the initial search efforts, became the focal point for an alternative theory championed by the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, TIGER. Their hypothesis paints a haunting scenario. Instead of crashing into the ocean, Earhart and Noonan made an emergency landing on Nikumaroro's reef flat during low tide, where the plane could temporarily rest above water. As the tide rose, the aircraft would have been gradually pulled off the reef into deeper water, explaining why subsequent search planes never spotted it. A lonely aircraft swallowed by the unforgiving sea. The evidence supporting this castaway theory began in 1940 when British colonial officer Gerald Gallagher discovered a partial human skeleton, 13 bones, alongside what appeared to be a makeshift campsite on Nikumaroro. Imagine Earhart's final days there, scanning empty horizons while desperately maintaining her hope for rescue. Dr. D.W. Hoodless initially examined these bones and concluded they belonged to a short European man, causing authorities to dismiss any connection to Earhart. The bones were subsequently discarded, seemingly closing this chapter forever. Modern forensic science, however, has breathed new life into this cold case. When forensic anthropologist Richard Jantz re-examined Hoodless's original measurements using multivariate discriminant function analysis, techniques unavailable in the 1940s, he found they actually matched a tall European woman of Earhart's exact height, 5'7" to 5'8". His statistical analysis revealed striking correlations between the bone measurements and Earhart's proportions, challenging the hasty dismissal from decades earlier. The physical evidence extends beyond bones. Over multiple expeditions, researchers have recovered artifacts telling a survival story. A woman's shoe heel matching Earhart's style, fragments of a compact mirror similar to one in her possession, and a jar of freckle cream consistent with the brand she used. A partial rubber shoe sole stamped Cat's Paw Rubber Company, USA, matching footwear Earhart wore in pre-flight photographs, stands as silent testimony. Aluminum aircraft pieces discovered on the island have been analyzed, suggesting they match components from a Lockheed Electra. A sextant box, potentially used by navigator Fred Noonan, further supports the castaway narrative. The incomplete skeleton finds explanation in Nikumaroro's ecosystem. Coconut crabs, massive land crustaceans with claws powerful enough to crack coconuts, likely scattered many bones into their burrows, explaining why a complete skeleton was never found. The timed radio transmissions provide perhaps the most poignant evidence. They coincided precisely with low tide at Nikumaroro, when a partially submerged plane might still power its electrical system. Like clockwork, these signals followed the island's rhythmic tides, suggesting Earhart was alive, waiting as water levels fell, repeatedly attempting contact with a world that couldn't find her. Each transmission represented a moment of desperate hope as she sat alone on a forgotten island, her voice reaching outward but finding no answer. While those radio transmissions from Gardner Island paint a picture of survival, there's another possibility that challenges everything we think we know about Earhart's fate. What if the reason no definitive aircraft wreckage was ever found isn't because it sank in deep waters, but because it was deliberately hidden by an enemy nation during the prelude to World War II? The theory that Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were captured by Japanese forces offers a completely different ending to their story. This perspective emerges from consistent anecdotal evidence from Marshall Islands residents who claim they witnessed Earhart's plane crash and the pilot's subsequent detention. These witnesses describe seeing foreign pilots, including a woman with short hair, being taken away by Japanese authorities. The geopolitical context of 1937 adds weight to these accounts. Relations between the United States and Japan were deteriorating rapidly, with the Pacific becoming a strategic flashpoint. Some researchers suggest Earhart's flight might have served dual purposes. an around-the-world record attempt doubling as reconnaissance to gather intelligence on Japanese Pacific activities. This context would explain Japanese interest in capturing the famous aviator and her navigator. What initially appeared to be compelling photographic evidence emerged when researchers discovered an image in the National Archives allegedly showing Earhart and Noonan at a dock in the Marshall Islands under Japanese supervision. The photograph created media excitement, seemingly depicting a woman with Earhart's distinctive short haircut and a man resembling Noonan. Many considered this definitive proof of their capture. However, further investigation thoroughly discredited this evidence. Researchers discovered the exact same image had been published in a Japanese travel book in 1935, 2 years before Earhart's disappearance. This revelation undermined what many had considered the strongest support for the Japanese capture theory. Despite this setback, additional testimonies continue to fuel speculation. U.S. military personnel who served in the Pacific during World War II reported seeing Earhart's distinctive Lockheed Electra in a hangar on Saipan Island. Others claim to have heard confessions from Japanese officials about American prisoners matching Earhart and Noonan's descriptions. Though compelling, these accounts remain difficult to verify decades later. When examined through a practical lens, significant problems with this theory become apparent. Most critically, aviation experts have consistently demonstrated that Earhart's Electra simply couldn't have reached the Marshall Islands with her remaining fuel after missing Howland Island. The aircraft would have exhausted its fuel supply long before reaching Japanese-controlled territory. The technical limitations of her aircraft make it virtually impossible for her to have reached the Marshall Islands, whether intentionally or accidentally. This theory also struggles to explain why Japanese authorities would have kept Earhart's capture secret rather than using her as a propaganda tool. A famous American aviator in Japanese custody would have represented a significant diplomatic bargaining chip in the tense pre-war environment. The absence of any official Japanese records acknowledging her capture further undermines this narrative. When we compare the radio transmission evidence pointing to Gardner Island with these geopolitical speculations, we find one theory supported by concrete technical evidence, while the other remains limited by practical impossibilities and contradictory historical records. Beyond the theories and evidence we've explored, there's a fascinating question worth considering. Would Amelia Earhart have become the cultural icon she is today if she had simply completed her journey? Her disappearance didn't just end a remarkable life. It transformed her from a celebrated aviator into something far more enduring. A legend that continues to captivate our imagination nearly 9 decades later. Earhart had established herself as a pioneering figure in aviation before she vanished. Her solo flight across the Atlantic had shattered barriers and inspired women worldwide. The mystery of her fate elevated her status from famous to immortal in our collective consciousness. When the news of her disappearance broke in 1937, Americans gathered around radios in stunned silence. "The nation held its breath," recalled one journalist who covered the story. People wept openly in the streets, not just for a missing pilot, but for a dream that seemed to vanish with her. The resources devoted to solving Earhart's disappearance are staggering compared to other missing pilots from her era. While numerous aviators met similar fates during those dangerous early days of flight, none have inspired the same dedication, speculation, and ongoing search efforts. This disparity reveals how certain mysteries capture our imagination, particularly when they involve someone who was already breaking boundaries. The theories about Earhart's fate reflect the changing social and political landscape of the decades in which they emerged. The Japanese capture theory gained traction during the Cold War when suspicions of foreign powers were heightened. The castaway theory found footing when forensic science was advancing rapidly, Each explanation tells us about ourselves and our cultural moment as much as what might have happened to Earhart. Behind Earhart's enduring legacy were two key figures, her sister Muriel and husband G.P. Putnam. After the disappearance, Putnam took financial responsibility for Earhart's aging mother and worked with Muriel to publish biographies and maintain public interest in Amelia's achievements. Their efforts ensured that Earhart wouldn't be forgotten as public attention naturally shifted elsewhere. "I was in a unique position to share insights about Amelia's life and achievements," Muriel wrote, demonstrating her commitment to preserving her sister's legacy. Earhart's status as a woman in a male-dominated field shaped both her life and how her disappearance was investigated and remembered. In the 1930s, female pilots were rare exceptions. Her pioneering spirit challenged gender norms and opened doors that would eventually lead to broader social change for women. Her vanishing became more than the loss of a skilled pilot. It became the loss of a symbol for women's potential in previously restricted domains. The cultural impact of Earhart's disappearance appears in countless books, films, and documentaries produced over decades. From speculative fiction to serious historical investigations, her story continues to inspire creative works that explore what her life and disappearance mean to us. Few historical figures have maintained such relevance across generations, appearing in everything from children's books to scientific expeditions. Modern technology has revolutionized how we approach historical mysteries like Earhart's. Sonar imaging can now scan previously inaccessible ocean floors. DNA analysis offers the potential to identify remains with certainty. Satellite photography can reveal details about remote locations that might hold clues. These technological advances don't just offer hope for solving the mystery, they reflect our ongoing commitment to finding answers about Earhart's fate. After nearly a century of searching, the mystery of Amelia Earhart continues to captivate us, not just because of the question, "Where did she go?" but because her story touches something fundamental in human nature, our fascination with the unexplained and our need for closure. The most difficult thing is the decision to act. The rest is merely tenacity. This philosophy guided Earhart through barriers that seemed insurmountable to women of her era. "Courage is the price that life exacts for granting peace," she wrote, encapsulating why her legacy endures. Her true monument exists in the generations she inspired to pursue their own impossible journeys. When examining historical mysteries like Earhart's, look beyond simple explanations. Question established narratives. The most meaningful truths often exist in the questions we continue to ask, rather than the answers we think we've found.